Vaccinations continue to ramp up in Ontario, and so do vaccination incentives amongst employers. A number of businesses are now offering their employees little extra motivation to ensure that they get vaccinated, including financial rewards. Some are calling into question the ethics behind this. Nav Nanwa is back with another installment of The Business Casual. He's here every couple of weeks to talk about stories in the business and marketing world. So Nav, tell me about why companies are doing this. I mean, why would a company offer employees an incentive to get vaccinated right now?
Well, Jill, employers want safe work environments and they want them now. I actually spoke to a few employers about this, and the general feeling was that this was the path to normalcy. And this was also a way to avoid any major outbreaks in the future. This really pertains to many essential workplaces where employees are in close quarters from each other. But it's also worth noting that this is being positioned as a reward for employees or a show of appreciation. I spoke to Andrea Bartlett, who is the HR director of Humi. Humi is a benefits and payroll solutions company. And she also felt that this could be a way to address any vaccine hesitancy that might exist in the workplace.
Certainly a big element of it. I think the unknown around the impact is causing hesitancy. Not knowing, when you look at clinical trials and you read up on what a clinical trial is for the first time, and you look at the duration for the first time, and you compare that to what we're seeing being the turnaround time for the COVID-19 vaccine, I think it is causing hesitation. And I'm certainly no expert and definitely don't have a science background, so I leave that to the experts. But from the business standpoint, I think it is meant to alleviate some of that hesitation.
So who are some of the companies that are doing this right now, Nav?
So one of the first businesses to make an incentive program like this public was actually back in March with a local retailer by the name of Urban Nature Stores. So Urban Nature Store is an independent retailer of outdoor wild birding and nature products. They have 7 locations across the GTA, and they employ about 47 employees. Now, what they're doing is they're paying all of their staff a full day's worth of pay, so 8 hours, regardless if they're full-time or part-time. And it doesn't have to be during work hours, so anyone can get a vaccine on the weekend and still get the 8 hours pay. According to their founder, Paul Oliver, 70% of his team had already been vaccinated across its locations. And when I spoke to him yesterday, he told me that this was not only a reward for his employees, but it was also a way for him to ensure that his stores are considered safe during this time. So Paul told me that because of the pandemic, bird watching is definitely the new binge watching. And this was a way for him to ensure that any customers that were coming to his store through curbside pickup were being taken care of from a safety standpoint.
Okay, so I mean, paid time off, that's one thing. What else is being done by some of these companies?
So Ecom is a major Eastern Canadian wood products company. So their operations focus on the manufacturing, marketing, and distribution of lumber, and they have sites in both Ontario and Quebec. They actually made news earlier this month because they are providing cash bonuses to their employees. So an employee gets $200 for their first shot, $150 for their second shot, but if they go with the single dose Johnson & Johnson, they'll get $350. According to their senior public relations advisor, Bilyana Nashiva, they've made this bonus available to anyone who isn't able to get a vaccine, as well as any employee who may have gotten the vaccine prior to being hired by the company. But Jill, it actually goes further than that. They're actually running an internal contest right now where the first 3 work sites that get to an 85% vaccine threshold will have the opportunity to win one of 3 $10,000 prizes at their mills. So one of these mills is going to end up with a ping pong table.
Absolutely. And I gather you found one company that's encouraging vaxies, those vaccine selfies, to another way of promoting this?
Oh, yes. The vaccine selfie is alive and well when it comes to incentives. So Impala Canada is a company that specializes in mining palladium, and they're headquartered here in Toronto. Their Lac des Îles mine is located in Thunder Bay and employs 700 employees. So right now they're sitting at about a 54% workforce vaccination rate, which is quite good. They had a clinic on site, and once someone gets vaccinated, they were handed a $100 gift card. But in addition to this, the general manager of Lac des Îles, Brian Wilson, told me yesterday about a Vaxi campaign. So employees who send a selfie or a vaxie of themselves after their vaccination can email it to the HR department, and they would be entered into a draw to win a prize. Now, what's interesting about Lac des Îles is that their work sites require a 14-day rotation. So a lot of this really went down to ensuring that any worker coming into that 14-day rotation of work was being taken care of and was following safety protocol.
Yeah, I mean, from a safety point of view, that totally makes sense. I wonder just generally how the employees are feeling about all of these incentives.
Well, the first that comes up in this instance, Jill, is really confidentiality. And so it's worth noting that all the businesses and organizations I spoke to did say that they did not require their employees to make their vaccination status known to coworkers. But they also mentioned that they saw an uptake on the amount of employees that were getting vaccinated to redeem some of these benefits. Some of the reaction online to some of these stories that went public that I noticed is that a lot of people are wishing that their workplaces would follow suit, that they would institute similar programs. So there seems to be some vaccination incentive FOMO right now.
And this is all legal to offer incentives like this?
That's where we get into a bit of a gray area, because right now there isn't nothing in place to stop an employer right now to run these programs. So I decided to go to the source. So I spoke to Toronto employment lawyer Maniza Sheikh about this. She feels that any human rights complaint from an employee to an employer regarding this won't get far because the policy is meant to make the business a safer place. But she did bring up an interesting point as to why these programs could make employees feel uncomfortable.
If for whatever reason I have, a religious reason as to why I may not want the vaccination, and, because I choose to exercise my right under the human rights legislation or under, charter legislation, which gives me freedom of the right to practice my religion, presumably it would be unfair for one of my colleagues to benefit by getting a cash bonus. Or, maybe if it's another employer, they may turn around and say something like, okay, well, if you get the vaccination, then we'll have you at the front line dealing with clients, and anybody who's not vaccinated, we're going to put you in the back.
So what do you think? I mean, obviously, as you've shown here, Nav, more and more companies seeming to do this. What impact do you think this could have going forward?
So in the case of Ecom and Impala, they both representatives told me that they've actually had other organizations and other industries reach out to them about how they've been able to execute these programs. So there is a lot of interest amongst essential workplaces to execute similar incentive driving programs for their employees. So it will be fascinating to see if more incentives roll out broadly across other industries. But Jill, I feel like the conversation goes deeper than that. During my conversation with Maniza, she also heard from employers that are telling their employees that anyone who's not vaccinated by September can't come back to work. So employers are starting to get very, very creative in regards to the restrictions that they could put around vaccinations in the workplace. But there was an interesting development that came out of the US this week. So Delta Airlines announced that any new employee that gets hired by the airline company needs to be vaccinated before they could start working. And this was something that myself and Humie's Andrea Bartlett actually talked about. And she feels that this is just the beginning of bold moves that we're going to see from major companies moving forward.
I think you're going to see, again, companies leading the way in terms of setting expectations, and they've clearly evaluated that risk and they know that it's what's best for their business. And then we're going to see many organizations who wait to react to what the government requires. I think, again, Delta is a great example of leading the charge. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that the travel industry has really taken a hit because of COVID.
This is so interesting, Nav, and especially, as you mentioned, that you found a lot of people actually having a bit of FOMO, wanting to see their employers implement something like this as well. So yeah, something to keep an eye on. Thank you as ever. Good to chat.
Thanks, Jill. Appreciate it.
That's Nav Nanwa. He's a business and marketing guy for Here and Now with this week's edition of The Business Casual.